This is the first part of the recovered transcripts of the Death Stranding incident. Fragmented interviews, personal journals, and field reports preserved in analog. Some were spoken aloud. Most were never meant to be heard. They come from couriers, scientists, soldiers, from the broken-hearted, the hopeful, and the damned. Each voice a signal across time, stranded, but still reaching. Together they form a map of a world unraveling, and the fragile threads trying to hold it together. What follows is not a story with answers, but with echoes. So rewind if you must. Press play when you're ready. Bridges staff. 2 years ago. Distribution center west of capital North City. It's been about a year now since we came here with the rear guard. The first folks who did us the favor of setting up the chiral relay and patching things up before we arrived. So we're doing alright. Not so sure about everyone else though. Folks back home sound kind of freaked out. We don't know what's going on in Central or Capital, let alone how Amelie and the others who kept heading west are doing, but something doesn't feel right. What's more, a lot of the guys have developed some kind of agoraphobia. Like the thought alone of going outside scares the shit out of them. See, the distro centers and way stations around these parts aren't like the ones back east. They're much more isolated, out in the middle of nowhere. Can't help but feel cut off from the world. And there's not a lot of staff on hand neither, which means you often have to do the work of 2 guys, which can make it that much lonelier too. And then you factor in the terrorism rumors. Also, is it just me, or does it feel like there's more mules out there these days? Don't get me wrong, I know they're not out to get us. All they want is our cargo, right? Well, that doesn't change the fact that they're not making our work any easier. Especially since a lot of these guys used to be first-rate porters, and could run rings around us if they hadn't, you know. Still, for now, their network systems are up and running. And we're just holding out for the day when the second expedition comes through with a working Cupid. Till then, we'll keep things chugging along. That much we can do. For bridges and country. Am I right? Timefall and power failures. I volunteered to join Bridges. Signed up with my brother Victor. See, we both remembered when America was still America. When we still had planes and satellites. When we were still connected to everyone and everything. The world was different. Bigger. And we wanted it back. He was chosen for the first expedition and hit the road damn near straight away. Me, I got told to hang back here in Central. Which is okay, I guess. Corpse disposal means taking your fair share of timefall in the line of duty. You get a sense for it after a while. A sixth sense for when the clouds are about to open up. Of course, the clouds themselves are a big tell, and an inverse rainbow's a guarantee you're in for some shit. But there are smaller signs too. Changes in the air. A smell on the wind. When it hits, you got power outages to deal with. Far as I understand it, which ain't all that far, it's to do with high concentrations of chiralium, causing electromagnetic interference or something. Which also interacts with water and kicks up clouds of ozone, which then makes the temperature drop like a rock. Anyway, I may be used to timefall, but that don't mean I'm immune to it. Believe me, I'm younger than I look. My big brother would take a lot of pleasure in telling you that if you could see me now. The lake at Ground Zero. When I first laid eyes on the lake here at Ground Zero, I was blown away by the sheer size of it. I never imagined anything to be so huge. This was just after the Death Stranding, and not many people had seen the craters up close yet. Back then, I was still living with my parents and my brother on the East Coast. An explosion like nothing the world had seen before tore a gaping hole in the heart of America. There were all kinds of rumors floating around at the time, that it was a meteor, that it was a nuke dropped by another country. I was just a kid, but even I could tell the adults didn't have a clue, so you can imagine how I felt. And then we found out there were other explosions, not just here in America, but the world over. By the time we learned they were voidouts, and what voidouts were, the country was pretty much done. But hey, that was then and this is now, and things are looking up. I just got told my kid brother's still alive. Word is he's heading up a corpse disposal team in capital North City. Handled his shit well enough to get picked up for the second expedition. 3 more years, and he'll be out here with me, Can't wait to see him again. Interview with the Geologist. I remember it was just before I joined the expedition when I found those documents in Bridges HQ, research papers that predated the Death Stranding. People used to believe the dinosaurs had gone extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. But when this fellow investigated various locations where late Cretaceous dino fossils had been found, he came to the startling conclusion that there was hardly any evidence anywhere on Earth that supported the theory that dinosaurs had survived until the end of the Cretaceous. In other words, almost all of them had been wiped out long before that. The only place where there were fossils that did support the traditional theory was here, in North America, which suggests that this was the last part of the Earth to have been inhabited by dinosaurs. Not everyone agreed with this analysis at the time, but let's say he had it right. That would mean there is evidence of a mass extinction hidden here, right beneath our feet. Evidence which could prove invaluable in understanding the one on the horizon. Did the dinosaurs who happened to live here just get lucky? Or is there something special about this place that allowed them to survive? I'd love to get at the bottom of it, but I'm not sure I have what it takes. I'm not like Hartman. I don't have dooms or any other unique traits. Still, I want to make myself useful. I want to research the Stranding and help uncover the truth behind it. That's why I joined the expedition team after all. Interview with a paleontologist. In the period since the very first forms of life arose here on Earth, the planet has witnessed a number of mass extinctions, and as you're no doubt aware, the most significant of these are known as the Big Five. The first marked the end of the Ordovician period, while the next, at the end of the Devonian period, wiped out almost all marine life. But the third of these extinctions, at the end of the Permian period, around 250 million years ago, was even worse. 96% of all marine organisms and 75% of land organisms died as a result. The fourth extinction finished off most large reptiles, though the dinosaurs managed to hold on until the fifth came along at the end of the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. We humans are evolved from the small mammals, which managed to survive that particular catastrophe. Each of these 5 extinctions resulted from enormous changes to the natural environment. Species which were unable to adapt to these changes perished, while those which were ideally situated to evolve and thrive did just that. Evidence from records which predate the Death Stranding indicate that many scholars believed a 6th mass extinction was on its way, or that it may have already begun. There was something of a consensus regarding its cause as well: humanity's destruction of the environment. This led them to sound the alarm, warning the world of what was at stake. At the time, the greatest minds of the era believed that if the ecosystem could be preserved, and if humanity could learn to live in harmony with nature, then a future could be secured for all the world's species, humans included. But that was then, and this is now. If the phenomenon we are currently experiencing is indeed the 6th extinction, then it must be acknowledged that humanity is its main target. Is this divine punishment for our misdeeds? If so, then I suppose there is little that can be done. Perhaps there is no way forward for humanity now. Nevertheless, I refuse to give up. I will endeavor to find hope in our predicament. Interview with the Evo Devo biologist. I was born after the Death Stranding, so my conception of what the world once was is derived entirely from documents, photographs, and video. We didn't used to have timefall for one, just regular rain. No chiral clouds, only the traditional masses of suspended moisture. And one certainly didn't have to worry about tar bubbling up from underground, in most locales. Humans could travel anywhere, even into space, and we were blissfully unaware of the beach's existence. Suffice it to say, there is no doubt that this is a period of sweeping change that will have lasting repercussions for all life on Earth. Given that, dooms may simply be humanity's way of trying to adapt and survive. A beach exists within the consciousness of every individual. But these environmental changes, they affect all life on a genetic level, do they not? That's why I thought to investigate them, and the medium through which I chose to do so is the tar, which has become so ubiquitous. But you're not interested in that, I'm sure. So you know, there is a very real possibility that we have already failed to adapt to the 6th extinction, that we are but another evolutionary dead end, soon to be left behind. If that is the case, then it could be reasoned that the ones afflicted with dooms, and therefore blessed with an enhanced perception of the beach, are our successors, who will survive and supplant us. I suppose that would be a shame, but it doesn't trouble me all that much. My research will survive me as well, and the dooms I suffer can pick up from where I left off. They will carry on my genetic lineage too, for that matter. No, what worries me is that not even dooms will prove sufficient enough to endure this extinction. If that is the case, then humanity is doomed. It's certainly a possibility we have to acknowledge. But more than that, one question looms above all. Why? Why now? Why like this? That's what I want to know more than anything. Somehow I doubt the dinosaurs and all the other species that came and went ever considered that question. Worrying over the reason for this and that is a uniquely human condition, I suppose. Yet this idle curiosity may be the key to understanding and overcoming the stranding. Tar bubbles up from the beach. I've heard that this area was pretty inhospitable before I got here. Got your fair share of mountains, obviously. And on top of that, there were all these rumors about a secret terrorist base or something. So I figured I was in for a bad time. But when me and the team got here, yeah, it was way worse than what we thought. Felt like we could get jumped at any second, you know. I'll tell you what, though, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw all the tar out west. Wondered how the hell Amelie and her team made it through. But someone said it wasn't nearly as bad when they made the trip. I was sent out to take a closer look, and man, it was something else. And it hadn't been that long either. Hard to imagine all that bubbled up damn near overnight. Honestly, it felt like I was standing at the edge of the world. We don't know much about the tar, except that it wasn't around before the stranding, same as timefall and corallium. There's some speculation that it might be some byproduct of the beach, and that if you could somehow retrace the flow, you'd end up there. But that's all theoretical stuff. Right now, we've got a practical problem to deal with. One of the chiral relays we built is at risk of going under any moment. We don't have the manpower to relocate it yet, but we should once the second expedition shows up. Whether we can wait that long is another question, though. Maybe you could tell them to get their asses in gear if you get the chance. Corallium coatings. Truth is, we discovered it by dumb luck. Folks had made a point of building cities outside of timefall regions, but the way stations and the distro centers were a different story. No way around it, really. Even through all that exposure, meant that they'd deteriorate quicker. But when you're keeping an eye out for things deteriorating, you soon notice how corallium crystals react when exposed to timefall. Which is to say, not at all. They showed no signs of degradation whatsoever. Stayed rock solid, even after getting soaked. It sort of made sense. Corallium comes from the beach, right? And over there, time doesn't pass. Timefall had no effect on the crystals, because they may as well exist outside of time. And when we ran a few experiments, that's pretty much all we confirmed. Now I know what you're thinking. Why not build way stations out of corallium, right? Yeah, if only. Turns out overexposure to that stuff is lethal. And it can't be stored in large quantities either. Still, at least the corallium coatings we came up with do just enough to keep the rot manageable. That's something. Oxytocin. Back before the stranding, people didn't rely on smart drugs like oxytocin so much, probably because they weren't so damn isolated. Me and my brother Igor, we got separated from our folks after the first Voidout. Shit was crazy. I was just a kid, but he was even younger. Too young to have to go through all that. Spending night after night holed up in those ruins, it was rough, but we had each other. Held each other close to stay warm, and it made things better. Docs tell you that's oxy doing its thing. The hormone the body releases when we touch each other. It's why mothers form bonds with their kids, when they hold them and other stuff like that. But with the comms networks not what they were, it's more dangerous than ever to go outside. Even when you got other people around, they don't seem too keen to make physical contact. A collective aversion due to an ingrained fear of BTs and voidouts, or so I've been told. Add it all up, and you got yourself a people that's isolated, scattered, stressed out, and insecure. So we got no choice but to supplement our oxy levels. fill the void left by physical affection with chemical TLC. Pretty fucked up, am I right? I know we used to go to war over race and religion and all that back in the day, but that had to be better than living like this. Why planes and drones can't fly. Know what I wanted to be when I was a kid? An astronaut, believe it or not. Must be hard to imagine now. But back before the stranding, the skies were full of drones, airplanes, all kinds of crap zipping back and forth from continent to continent, some that even went up into outer space. But the chiral clouds put an end to all that. Nothing flies now. It all came crashing down, and my dreams with it. Damned clouds messing with flight systems somehow, don't ask me how. Eat up comm signals too. Which is how come long-distance signals can't get through anymore. That's why we got no idea what's happening in other countries. Set us back more than a century in that respect. People talk a lot about how the stranding sent us scrambling for the cities. Severed the bonds between us, but it did more than that. It severed the land from the sky. Antimatter in storage. Everything went like clockwork, and we recovered all the antimatter. Performed the requested maintenance on the magnetic trap too. It should be a bit more stable now. I still can't believe those amateurs managed to get their hands on the stuff though. Apparently they stumbled across it while researching chiral clouds, though I suppose that kinda makes sense. Even before the Death Stranding, there was evidence that regular lightning storms could generate antimatter, and chiral ones are surely stranger. Sounds like they were able to capture it only once though, so that's something. Imagine if antimatter was easy to get hold of. Terrorists would have a field day. Anyway, we've got it stored safely now, and no one's the wiser. I just hope something good comes of it, that's all. You know what the alternative is, Lochner? The President's Ghost 1. This all happened years ago, so I can only hope enough time's passed that I won't get into trouble for talking about it. But believe it or not, people used to say that the President's official residence was haunted. Bear in mind that most born after the Death Stranding don't go in for any of that supernatural stuff. Why would they, when they know for a fact that BTs not only exist, but are out to get us? For folks like me, though, it used to be different. Even if you didn't really believe ghosts were real, or know anything about them, I don't know, call it a generational thing. I reckon most of the others who worked the detail would say the same if you put the screws to them. Now, here's where it gets a bit weirder. The ghost people whispered about, it was the President's. I saw her myself plenty of times. Pretty much every time I did a night shift, actually. There she was in the office or a corridor or something, just standing there. I tried calling out a couple of times, but whenever I did, she'd up and disappear. I'd say she, the ghost I mean, was in her 20s. But I'm not kidding when I tell you she looked like a younger President Strand. And before you ask, there's no way it could have been an intruder. Couldn't have been the President herself either. She was always sleeping whenever there was a sighting. And even if she hadn't been, no weird trick of the light could have made her look that much younger. I know it sounds crazy, but after a while we couldn't help but believe it was a ghost. Either the President's, or that of someone else who was her spitting image. I knew I'd catch hell for it, but I just had to tell Di Hartman. It was a security concern for one thing, and for all we knew the President was sleepwalking or whatever. I was worried about her too, truth be told, and I thought it was my duty to report it. Let me tell you, I sure as hell didn't expect the response I got. He told me, matter of fact, that the ghost was actually the President's daughter, Amelie. I didn't even know the President had a daughter. Even he'd only found out recently, he said, and he'd been waiting for the right time to tell us. Apparently she'd suffered from something known as a locked-in syndrome from birth, had been hospitalized for a ridiculously long time. The President hadn't shared it with anyone except her closest confidants either. And then, after 20 years of treatment, Amelie had made a miraculous recovery. She was able to move around again. The President and her daughter had been living apart, but after her recovery, Amelie came to join her mother at the residence. It was kept on the need-to-know basis at first, just the head of the detail and some of the guards. I never told anyone else about it, until now. The President's Ghost 2. When did I first learn about Amelie? Let's see. It was about 10 years ago when the president first told me. There'd been rumors circulating among the president's security detail about a ghost in the official residence. Idle talk by bored soldiers, I figured. But then the president called me in and set the record straight. The ghost was her daughter, Amelie. The rumors had made their way to the president, and she was worried things might get out of hand. She explained how Amelie had been suffering from locked-in syndrome ever since she was born, but that she'd finally overcome it and was able to live a normal life again together with her mother. There was a complication, though. Amelie's soul had somehow been born on the beach. That's why her body suffered from the syndrome. I didn't really understand what she meant, but I understand when she ordered me to keep it a secret until her reconstruction plan was nearly complete. Until Sam and Amelie were ready to lead Bridges. The repatriate and the daughter with Doom's numbers like nobody else. She knew the separatists would be up in arms if they found out about the two of them. Dead Man. Bridge Babies. Interview. Look, I'm kind of new here at Bridges, so I don't know if any of this will be useful to you. Still, I'm happy to talk about BBs if that's what you want. They call me Dead Man, on account of my familiarity with the dead. Get it? We've always been on good terms, you see. Used to have regular little chats back when I worked in the morgue. Anyway, that's also the reason I work on BB maintenance and research, to learn more about those who are no longer with us. But I digress. Fact is, BBs were already being issued to our forces in the field before I joined Bridges. What's more, research into the little guys had already been conducted long ago, but no one took the plunge and put what they discovered to practical use. Still, what that did mean for us is that when Bridges wanted to build our own BBs, most of the work had already been done for us. We just needed to follow the instruction manual, so to speak. Which isn't to say that we have any idea how they work. Not how they can detect BTs or how they can connect this world to the other side. We still have much to learn about our little friends. But one thing is certain. Their continued study will lead us to a greater understanding of the Stranding, and of life and death itself. That much I can assure you. Well, I think that's about all I have to tell you today. Hopefully I'll have something new to share next time we chew the fat. See you around, I guess. BB echolocation. Dolphins use a sensory mechanism known as echolocation to keep track of both their fellow pod members and any potential prey. As the name suggests, they produce sounds which bounce off objects in return as echoes, allowing them to get an idea of their surroundings. Interesting in and of itself, of course. But what I find far more interesting is the recent research suggesting that BBs use a similar method to detect BTs. As you know, BB pods are designed to mimic the conditions inside a human womb, and are a key to preserving the BB's connection with this world and the next. Well, recent research now suggests that BBs are capable of producing something not unlike a dolphin's sound waves. These pulses travel through the amniotic fluid and out to the other side, bounce off BTs, and return as echoes, allowing a BB to ascertain the location of threats. Pretty cool, right? Fear as pleasure. Whether they realize it or not, the people of our fallen nation suffer greatly as a result of the separation and isolation we must all endure. That's why oxytocin supplementation is so vital. However, not all of us require it to survive. In fact, recent studies have shown something very interesting indeed. An increase in the number of people who regard fear not as a stressful experience to be avoided, but a pleasurable one to be sought out. In humans, the amygdala regulates the emotional response to fear and pleasure-inducing stimuli. Some scientists theorize that because these contradictory emotions are processed by the same region, we may have the capacity to convert one into the other. Conversely, with the two governed by different parts of the brain, such a transformation would be impossible. In an age where threats such as BTs, timefall, and terrorism abound, could the ability to experience fear as pleasure serve as a useful mutation? An adaptation, even? I don't see why not. No blue in the inverted rainbow. We humans are complex, multicellular organisms. 60 trillion cells inside each one of us, they say. How many of these cells need to die for us to consider a person dead? Are there any cells in particular which determine whether a person is alive or dead? These questions are academic, of course. The exact point of death can't be calculated using cell counts. On the other hand, no one can deny the existence of degenerative diseases that gradually destroy more and more cells, leaving the victim effectively half dead. And what about me? Most of my organs have been harvested from other people. They still work, of course, but could their original owner have been said to be alive? I really don't know. Incidentally, have you ever heard of a fun little experiment they once did with roundworms called C. elegans? These creatures are notable for glowing bright blue when exposed to UV light, but only when they die. It seems to be a reaction from the anthonylic acid within the organism, and it's known as death fluorescence. Yep, that's right. Blue is very much the color of death, it seems. Can it therefore really be a coincidence that there's no blue in an inverted rainbow? Timefall strengthens an area's connection to the beach. It has something to do with chiral particles becoming excited, I believe. In spaces connected to the beach, electromagnetic waves with a blue wavelength can travel easily through the seam, leaking out onto the beach. Some people think that's where the blue from the inverted rainbow goes. Who knows? The fact that blue has a strong connection to death, though, that much seems pretty inarguable. Human sacrifices under London Bridge. Before I joined Bridges, I watched an old movie called My Fair Lady. It's about a flower girl, Eliza, a real cockney from old London. She meets a professor, and he trains her to speak and act like a high-class lady. Anyway, I've heard that My Fair Lady might have something to do with London Bridge. You know the song, right? They start out trying to build it back up with wood and clay, and they finish with gold and silver. There was a reading of the film that said Eliza symbolized the bridge, or something along those lines. But that reminds me of a far more sinister theory, that the fair lady in the song is actually an immurement, a sacrifice buried alive in the foundations of the bridge to keep it standing. God only knows if there's any truth to it. Oh, and have you seen The Shape of Water? It's another movie with a heroine named Eliza. But this Eliza can't speak. She's mute. But it's not about teaching the girl to behave properly. It's just a good old-fashioned love story. If you get the chance, you should definitely check it out. What became of Deadman? I'm not connected to anyone or to anything. Not to my mother or the other side. Nothing. All that stuff about how I was created from pluripotent stem cells, that's just a cover story. I actually started life in a womb, albeit an artificial one. A human egg fertilized with human sperm. So far, so natural. But after that, technology took over. Any organs that were absent or lacking, I got from someone else. I've often wondered when I was technically born, given all that. The moment of fertilization? The moment I was taken from the incubator? Either way, there was nothing ordinary about it. I came into this world disconnected. No wonder I don't have a beach to call my own. Can you blame me for developing an obsession? After all, without a beach, death really is the end. Game over. Adios. Or so I thought. I recently discovered that I was mistaken about all that, thanks to Lou. I finally got to visit the beach. I may not have my own, but it seems that they're not closed to me after all, as long as I'm connected to someone. The beach is no more than a space between life and death. Lacking one doesn't mean you're not alive. I mean, I'm definitely alive. If anything, not having your own just means that you're already connected to everyone in this world. It's quite the epiphany, and it certainly put a great many worries of mine in perspective. Discovering America. Tell me, how much do you know about America? Not much is my guess. After all, it was already a wreck by the time either of us was born. Still, given that the whole purpose of Bridges is its reconstruction, I thought it'd be a good idea to learn a bit more about what we're trying to put back together. I imagine that you're aware of the fact that America was founded by European settlers. But do you know the name of the very first one? The man who discovered this place? Very good. Columbus is right. But let's not give the man too much credit. He apparently went to his grave thinking that America was some uncharted Asian island. It took another European explorer, Amerigo Vespucci, to realize that America was actually a whole new continent, completely unrelated to Asia. That's why it was named after him, you see. Having said that, there are those who question whether Vespucci deserved such an honor. There's a distinct lack of evidence that several of his alleged voyages to the New World even happened. Some think he lied in order to ensure that the new continent would be named after him and not Columbus. It was a hot topic of scholarly debate for centuries. Can you believe that? If you ask me, though, it really doesn't matter. Neither of them discovered America anyway. No one did. It was here all along, and already home to a great many people, too. The notion that a European discovered this place, or anyone else for that matter, is the biggest lie of all, don't you think? Die Hartman. Mules and Drone Syndrome. Bridges' primary objective is to rebuild America, and in order to rebuild, one of our main tasks is to reconnect cities and other settlements by re-establishing a delivery network. Back before the Death Stranding, the comms and delivery networks were what held society together. The whole thing was automated, AI managed, deliveries carried out by drone. The belief was that taking people out of the equation would revolutionize the whole system. But things didn't quite pan out that way. Instead, we started seeing cases of what would eventually be dubbed drone syndrome. It was too much for some folks to accept, leaving everything to machines and nothing for the common man. And indeed, the oxytocin deficiency and hormonal imbalances we confirmed seemed to back up that assessment. Humanity needed to be a part of the process. So laws were put in place, and we stepped back into the picture again. And then what happened? All the people put out of work by machines who got called up again convinced themselves society couldn't survive without them. And that brought on a whole new disorder. Delivery dependence syndrome, they called it. When the Death Stranding tore us apart, the delivery problem spiraled even further. It wasn't helped any by the fact that the chiral clouds prevented planes and drones from flying, which means we had to go back to relying completely on human couriers, whether we liked it or not. Eventually, delivering goods became all some lived for. They were obsessed, addicted, consumed by the desire to deliver. Over time, they turned into the mules we know and love today. Humanity's biggest problem? Logistics. War and famine have been inescapable parts of human life since the rise of our species. And while the fall of America hasn't changed this fundamental truth, it's fair to say that these issues aren't pressing concerns. Can you remember the last time you heard of a prepper dying of starvation? Much less someone in a not city. No one's fighting over water or oil or anything else. Which isn't to say that people don't occasionally run out of supplies, but that's almost never because of a real shortage. It's usually a problem with logistics. In fact, it was to address such problems that the president created bridges and developed the chiral network. So yeah, no one's that desperate. Everybody's got enough for themselves, which is what led to the real problem. It's all too easy for people to become isolated from one another, and eventually forget that others even exist. People are free to live for themselves, for the moment, without a care for the future. The president understood this better than anyone, and I know just how much it pained her. The chiral network experiments between Central and Capital 1. Madam President, this will be your new office from today. The relocation of your official residence has also been completed, and the entire medical team has been brought along as well. Rest assured, the information regarding this move has been shared on a need-to-know basis only. I understand that following the loss of New York, you wish to direct the reconstruction efforts from Central Knot City. But in light of recent separatist activity on the eastern seaboard, we no longer consider it safe. We will see to it that the people continue to believe you are in Central, and Bridges HQ will operate as normal. As per your orders, the network research teams and delivery systems management have all been covertly transferred here to Capital Knot City. While we are doing our utmost to expedite testing of the chiral network link between Central and Capital, while not neglecting your immediate medical needs, of course, this will be our base of operations for the next stage in the fight to rebuild America. The chiral network experiments between Central and Capital 2. Madam President, I'm happy to report that the trial run was a success. The connection between Central and Capital was established without incident. No chiral spikes or other irregularities. The Cupid functioned within acceptable parameters as well. There's still a lot of work to do. Chiral holograms, chiral printing, and data recovery have yet to be proven viable. But the confirmation that data can be sent via the chiral network is a huge step forward for the UCA. Our next step will be to use Cupids to establish connections with the other cities. Preparations for the second expedition are already underway. We're still trying to track Sam down, but as soon as he's back with us, he'll be given his new command. Mules and local porters. When people hear mules, they think junkies driven crazy by a desire to steal supplies we so desperately need to survive. Lucky for us, not all couriers are predisposed to this condition. Not all mules, in fact. They were professionals once, and some still are. Some even complete proper deliveries from time to time. Fragile Express has been known to use them, along with independent porters. For those at risk of losing it, They say the only way to stave off the syndrome is to join a distro organization with strong leadership and support to help keep you on the straight and narrow. Or you can strike out on your own, but that's no easy path. There's a reason guys who run solo have a reputation for being bulletproof. The Symbiotic Surveillance Society. In the world before the Stranding, the online service industry was huge, possibly the biggest of them all. People wanted their lives to be smooth and stress-free, and countless companies were happy to oblige. Customers would provide information about themselves, browsing history, purchasing history, that kind of thing. And in return they'd get a pleasant, personalized internet experience. It wasn't anything like the dystopian surveillance state people used to worry about in the 20th century. Predictive advertising, customized health tips, that sort of thing. The internet transformed our lives, and in many ways for the better. But not everyone was happy. People started to worry that it was encroaching on people's freedoms, that the price we paid for so much convenience was constant monitoring and an abdication of control. We had become members of a symbiotic surveillance society. Naturally, there are people who have similar concerns about the chiral network. There's a pretty sizable faction that wants nothing to do with it whatsoever. That said, I can't help but feel they're being naive. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Connectivity and convenience have to come at a price. What's more, the stakes are a whole lot higher nowadays. We're not talking about a simple trade-off between privacy and convenience. It's the network or bust, survival or extinction, as far as humanity is concerned. Likes secrete oxytocin. Before the Stranding, the whole world was connected. There were networks, social networks, we called them, that people used to communicate all the time. They shared all sorts of stuff through them. A random thought, a pretty picture, a home movie, you name it. And if you liked something that someone else had uploaded, you let them know by giving them, well, a like. Sounds weird, I know, but that's the truth. Eventually someone ran tests on the users of these networks and discovered that receiving a like triggered a rush of oxytocin. The theory was that it stemmed from a sense of being acknowledged. Even though you couldn't see the person you were interacting with, it still felt like they were accepting you, praising you. And who wouldn't like that? But that same process is at the heart of the mule phenomenon. It's believed that an overdependence on the oxytocin rush provided by these kinds of interactions is a factor in porters going rogue. With this in mind, it wouldn't be wrong to characterize mules as oxytocin addicts. In essence, they are social animals at the mercy of validation. The situation after the first Death Stranding incident. There was a series of huge explosions. Well, not so much a series, they were simultaneous, worldwide. The global comms infrastructure was shot to hell, but we salvaged what we could and tried to make sense of what had happened. It didn't seem like much at the time, but it was a hell of a lot better than what we have now. Anyway, the government figured the whole thing was a terrorist attack at first. We'd been dealing with a lot of those back then, but it didn't take long to see that this was something else. The craters left by the blasts were bizarre. There was no rubble, no dust even, which led the scientists to rule out meteor strikes. There was trace neutron radiation, alpha rays, but we knew it wasn't nukes either. Some of the particles we detected we'd never even seen before. Carelium, although we didn't know it at the time. The more we studied them, the more our scientists came to the same conclusion. These are the results of annihilation events. It was right about that time that chiral clouds started to form, and after that, all communications with the outside world went down for good. The terrorist view of bridges. The first expedition set off without any problems. Both the advance party and the rear guard are en route to the west coast as we speak. They haven't reported any troubles with terrorists and the like yet, but the further out they get, the greater the danger. There's a hell of a lot of separatists out there who want nothing to do with the UCA. Some more extreme than others, perhaps, but there's no denying where they stand. Seems like just yesterday it was only ideological differences, strongly held opinions at worst. But then the Carelium started messing with people's heads, turning extremists into demons. Mules into Gestalt, and debate into violence. And now we're headed west into their territory. Invaders coming for their freedom. They're waiting for us, minds made up and guns in hand. Amelie and the others aren't looking for a fight. She's going to try to talk sense to people, convince them to join us. If all the cities sign on, our nation could rise again. No one wants to take anything from these people, only give them back what was lost. If only they could understand that. Locked-in syndrome. So it's been decided that Amelie will lead the expedition. In terms of talent and temperament, it was only ever going to be her, or Sam Strand. But we don't know where Sam is, which made the decision easy. Besides, there's no denying she's special. Amelie was born on the beach, or rather her physical body, her ha, that was born into this world, while her spiritual essence, her ka, was born on the beach. Medically speaking, they weren't sure what to call it. In the end, they settled on a diagnosis similar to what's known as locked-in syndrome, a condition where the subject is mentally present, but physically unable to move their body, except for their eyes sometimes. The president was able to communicate with Amelie's soul on the beach, but her body remained as it was when she was born. But after a time, thanks mainly to the president's efforts, she began to show progress. Amelie's physical and spiritual selves gradually came together, and her body began to develop normally. It was right about then that they realized she was also a doom sufferer, and began to ascertain her incredible abilities. She can transport herself physically to her own beach. Guess it makes sense. That world is more real to her than this one. She may have overcome her initial struggles, but she still spent most of her life on the other side. And over there, time stands still, which is why even now she looks like she's in her 20s. Eventually, the president came to feel that her daughter had been through enough. From that point onward, all communication with Amelie would be via hologram, even during the expedition. She wouldn't be in direct contact for most of the team. It's not a bad plan, to be fair. It'll help keep her out of reach of terrorists for a start. Designing the UCA flag. Bridget and I had a discussion about the UCA flag. She wanted something that was based on the old American design. You know the one, 50 stars and 13 stripes, states and colonies. A classic symbol of national pride. The president wanted people to remember that pride as we went about our rebuilding process. But I thought differently. The old American flag was redesigned 26 times. Every time a new state joined the Union, they had to add another star. It was easy to believe the country would keep on growing forever, end up taking over the world. Hell, most people believe just that. Good old manifest destiny, the mantra used to justify countless atrocities centuries ago. You can believe, I told the president, we damn well better not carry on that particular legacy. Freedom, liberty, equality, those principles should be enshrined and never denied. The stars of the UCA aren't states, but individuals. Each with value, each a part of the greater whole. That's what our flag and the UCA represent. Bridget's necklace. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was nervous as hell, but underneath there was a strange kind of euphoria. Not unlike the high I felt when I first went into combat years before. A nameless grunt, stumbling around, surrounded by vets who had seen it all before. Not that I'd stay nameless for long. Turned out I was a born survivor. And before I knew it, I earned myself a reputation in an audience with President Bridget Strand, several months after her inauguration. She looked me straight in the eye and told me that from that day on I answered to her. We were going to rebuild America together, she said. It may sound daunting and intimidating, but I knew even then that wasn't her intent. She spoke like someone who'd lived a dozen lifetimes, who'd made the most of each and every one. After she said her piece, she smiled and took a step closer to me. Her necklace, a simple Y-shaped thing, caught the light, and for an instant I saw something impossible. The necklace was glowing, radiant, spreading across her body, chest to abdomen. Like something was being drawn out of her ha, I thought at the time, though I couldn't tell you why. Every time I saw her with that necklace, I remembered the light. It was only much later that Bridget told me about her daughter, Amelie, and how it had been a virgin birth. Die Hardman's Confession. Bridget's BB Experiments. Part 1. As Deadman established in the course of his independent inquiries, the BB experiments were classified and carried out in an atmosphere of great secrecy. Deadman also asserts, correctly, that BBs were recognized as both media for chiral communications and as essentially human sacrifices. Bridges 1 was issued with BB pods, some of which found their way into the hands of terrorists out west, who adapted the technology for their own ends. This is further evidenced by the fact that the pods currently in use by the terrorists are identical to those issued to Bridges 1 members. We can only assume that they were stolen. In any event, the true nature of BBs remained a closely guarded secret that we could not and would not disclose to anyone. This was the case from the very beginning, which is why following the Death Stranding, government officials not in the know were certain that it was an act of terror. The actual cause, of course, was a cesarean section performed on a brain-dead pregnant woman. As you'll have heard, the surgeon who performed the operation saw a BT at the time. Bridget, who had just been inaugurated as president, believed that BBs could be used to prove to everyone that BTs did indeed exist. By dragging this invisible threat into the light, that people might come together again, instead of continuing to drift apart. There were terrible risks, she knew. But if America was to be whole once more, BTs couldn't remain hidden. If only we knew what would happen when we revealed them to the world. I'm sorry, this is taking a lot out of me. Can we pick it up a little later? Di Hartman's Confession, Bridget's BB Experiments, Part 2. Sorry about before, I just needed a break. I'm ready to continue if you like. The BB experiments continued after the stranding, even though the official line was that they'd been shut down. That's how we came to realize that BBs weren't just a means with which we could see BTs. They have the power to connect us to the other side. Power like that could help us make America whole again. Surely. That was our thinking at the time, anyway. Not all BBs were created equal, though. One in particular had potential that was off the charts. Yeah, you know which one I'm talking about. It was chosen to serve as the first sacrifice, but I didn't have the stomach to see it through. I couldn't do it. Not to his kid. Couldn't forsake that personal connection to save the world, I guess. So I tried to arrange a rescue. I betrayed my president, betrayed my country. Because of me, both Cliff and his BB ended up dead. It must have weighed on Bridget too. How could it not? Why else would she have taken in that little BB who died and came back to life as her own son? Another line to comfort and console us. But there's no pretending it didn't happen. Not after Sam told me about the flashbacks he experienced when hooking up to his own BB. Not after I realized Cliff had returned. Realized he wasn't looking for a bridge baby, but his baby, his own flesh and blood. And now you know why I've devoted my life to the UCA. It's the only way I can begin to atone for what I've done. Di Hartman's background, 1. U.S. Special Forces enlistment record, John Blake McClane. Name, John Blake McClane. Nationality, American. McClane scored above average in physical and mental aptitude tests. His talents were recognized by Captain Clifford Unger, who elected to give McClane special training. Under Captain Unger's command, McClane took part in several missions, during which he earned a reputation for survival against all odds, as evidenced by his nickname, Di Hartman. Di Hartman's background, 2. The following information concerning John Blake McClane's death was recovered following the activation of the chiral network. It is presented without comment or interpretation. All personal data and official documentation concerning the subject indicate that he is deceased. However, even after reconstruction and collection of data from additional sources, we were unable to confirm cremation of the subject's corpse. Unfortunately, recovery of incinerator records from the time in question has so far proved difficult, on account of the incident's proximity to the Death Stranding. While the possibility that the corpse underwent necrosis and subsequently transformed into a BT cannot be ruled out entirely, the probability is exceedingly low. In other words, there is no evidence that the subject has, in fact, died. Significant portions of the subject's personal data appear to have been discreetly modified and expunged, but forensic study has led us to the discovery of a living individual who bears a striking resemblance to the deceased. Subsequent analysis of genetic samples do indeed confirm a DNA match for this Di Hartman. End of tape 1.